And it is 6 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get our briefing session underway. Tuesday, January 21st, 2020. Can't believe it happened in 2010, but here we are, 2020. Don't remember 2010. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get underway. We have a briefing tonight from our city planner, Cassie Benson, and we'll be talking about the calendar here as well. And so it's going to take some time. But first, we'll go ahead and get over the consent items. Mr. Hugman, if you want to run those down for us, please.
Yes, sir. Mayor and City Council, tonight on your consent agenda, item 4A are the minutes for the January 7th City Council special meeting and the January 7th City Council regular meeting. Item 4B is a resolution authorizing the annual procurement of senior meal program services with the Visiting Nurse Association of Texas. This is through a City of Grand Prairie contract with an annual estimated expenditure of $72,500. For over 30 years, the senior citizens at the Senior Center have been provided a daily lunch program. This is administered through the Texas Department of Aging and Disability Services and the Dallas Area Agency on Aging. We serve about 65 to 100 meals every day through this program. The Visiting Nurse Association has been the contractor for this program since 2014 through a City of Grand Prairie contract. They competitively bid it again in 2017, and VNA again was selected as the lowest responsible bidder. This program does provide the meals. They use a registered dietitian to plan those meals, and meals are free for seniors who qualify or that are over 68 years of age. There is a voluntary donation, and then for those that are less than 60, they pay the full price of the meal. The program is self-supporting through the reimbursement grant from the DAAA and also the voluntary contributions.
If you ever want to interface with our seniors, you can do so. Just let them know anytime over at the Senior Center. For $1, you can have the same lunch that they do. And there's usually a packed house. The Senior Center is usually 100% full for these lunches. So
If you're over 60.
Yeah. Well, I'm old, so
Stand up for those that are less than 60.
Okay.
That's not me. Item 4C is a resolution approving the Dallas County election systems and software express vote universal voting system. Dallas County is going to a new voting equipment system, and they do require that the entities that contract with them vote to approve the use of that equipment. The equipment is listed in your agenda memo. This system has been certified by the Texas Secretary of State in 2018 and also by the United States Election Assistance Commission in 2018. The Dallas County Commissioners Court voted to adopt the use of this equipment in their September 17th Commissioners Court meeting. And so then they are asking each city who is contracting with them to also approve the use of that equipment.
We were briefed on the use of that equipment by, what's her name?
Tony Pickens.
Tony Pickens Pool did brief us on the use of that equipment as well.
And item 4D is a resolution casting the City Council vote for the fourth member of the Board of Directors of the Dallas Central Appraisal District. DCAT, you will remember that in September, the council voted to nominate Michael Hurt to the board. He is the current board member representing cities on that board. And then in November 19th, you cast your vote for Michael Hurt to the DCAT Board of Directors. He did not receive a majority of the votes, receiving 16 of the 30, or he received 13 votes, and he's required to have, a winning board member is required to have a majority or 16 votes. The next highest vote candidates were Brett Franks and Mona Dixon, who both received 3 votes, and by a coin toss to select the runoff, Mona Dixon is the other candidate. The resolution in your packet is to vote for Michael Hertz, since that is who you voted for before. Again, this is the runoff election for the DCAB Board of Directors.
Okay, very good.
Those
Anybody
are all
have
the consent items.
any concern with voting once again for Michael Hurt? I know we voted for him once before, so we're just recasting that same vote for him to represent us on council. Okay, very good. Okay, just as a side note, in the mayor's report tonight, I will be recognizing Mrs. Susan Pointer. I don't know if you know Susan, Sue. She is the de facto director of our Golden Heirs Choir, our senior choir here in town. And she's been doing that for quite a long time. And as her totally volunteer, once a week practices with the Golden Heirs Choir, so I'll be recognize her tonight as a champion of the city. And we have not made it a secret. The Golden Heirs, there's probably, what, 40 of them, I guess, so they may show up. We've invited them to come tonight to congratulate Sue on her recognition. So I'll be doing that during the mayor's report, so you don't be surprised. And a little bit of housekeeping. Pastor Gutierrez, our supposed to do our invocation, has the flu. So I've asked Joe to do our invocation tonight. We've taken care of that. Okay, the briefing that we have is pretty important from Benson. Here she is. This is, by the way, on executive session, we'll see how we're working in terms of time. This is an important piece of discussion as well, so we may have to defer this until afterwards. We'll just see how time goes on this one. Okay. Okay, Chastity.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I just want to give you all a status update of our zoning ordinance update process and where we are in that process. Start with the process overview and the progress we've made to date, and then go over a little bit of the schedule and the next steps. So if you all recall, we kind of had a three-phase approach to the project. Preparing a diagnostic report, drafting of the ordinance and map itself, and then refining and adopting the zoning ordinance and map. So our diagnostic process really was started back in January of 2019 when we launched our online survey and project website. We had a community open house in February and had some stakeholder interviews with some development community as well as staff and P&Z and received input from all of those opportunities that we had to interact with the public. And then we had a joint P&Z and City Council workshop in July. And that's where we presented basically the findings of all of the community input that we had received that, up until that point. We wanted some confirmation from council and P&Z with regard to some of the larger discussion topics, really to lay the foundation for the draft. And so the diagnostic report is what you all reviewed and confirmed during the joint meeting with P&Z. And so we really use that diagnostic report as the foundation for the draft document. So phase one was basically putting all of that information into that diagnostic report that you all saw in July. And then phase two has been working on the actual draft of the ordinance itself. And so that process has been ongoing since October with the staff and P&Z. As those drafts are presented to P&Z, you all are sent a copy of those as well, with the expectation, of course, that you all have the opportunity to look at the draft as it's going through the process, so that when we do reconvene to discuss it jointly, you all have had that opportunity to have that in front of you. So again, we've been sending that to you and to P&Z, and we've had discussions with the P&Z and with staff with regard to the draft. It's only been first draft iterations. There's not been a second draft of any of those sections that we've reviewed so far. And I'll go through some of the sections that we've started to review. Giving the update tonight to give you the status of that. And then we will have a joint P&Z and City Council workshop on February 24th. Obviously, as you all confirm your council calendar, that's one of the dates that is on your potential calendar. And then After the review of the draft, for further discussion, we'll have another joint P&Z and City Council workshop in April. The likelihood at that point will be different iterations of the draft from the first drafts, and then another community open house in May, and then public hearings tentatively around the June-July timeframe. So the first section that was reviewed was the general provisions, zoning districts, and land uses. And if you all recall in the diagnostic report, some of the feedback that we received from the public, some of our stakeholders, was that our ordinance was obviously outdated, but it was a little difficult to read. We had some districts that didn't necessarily align with where we were as a community to date. And so part of the evaluation of these sections was looking at our zoning districts, how we might pare down some of those, consolidate some of them, introduce new zoning districts. So currently we have some zoning districts that don't necessarily align with what we have in the city. So our current single-family zoning, the smallest lot that you can build in Duncanville now is 13,000 square feet. However, we have a large percentage of properties that do not meet that square footage. So we have a lot of non-conforming residential properties because they don't meet the current zoning as far as lot size. So we've done some evaluations of our code for things like this and introducing new districts to allow for a smaller lot size, and also allows for future redevelopment of certain areas that may have larger lots. And then we looked at an equivalency table, which we think is really important in terms of actual implementation of the code, because it shows the new districts and how it aligns with the existing districts. And sometimes it's a matter of a name change. So we've gone, we have a lot of non-residential districts now. We've got a local retail 2, but we don't have a local retail 1. You know, those kinds of things. So we've evaluated our existing non-residential districts and found ways to possibly consolidate those and introduce new ones in that as well. Classification of land uses. So this was a big discussion point during our evaluation of the existing code, recognizing that there are some uses that are just obsolete, that aren't really a part of the fabric of the community, but there are also new uses that have come into play over the past 20 years that need to be accommodated for. If you all recall our previous discussion in our joint workshop, a lot of the time you all were seeing specific use permit requests because there wasn't a land use classification in our zoning ordinance. And so, you know, looking at our ordinance and seeing how we might be able to accommodate certain uses that just make sense to introduce them as a land use. Introducing a permitted use chart. This isn't a new concept. I mean, every city has a permitted use chart, but we do not currently. And so it really does simplify the way that we display where uses are permitted. It's a very simple chart, you know, has the districts across the top, has the land uses down the side, and it tells you whether it's permitted or not, or permitted with an SUP or so forth. And so it's just a really easy visual representation of where you can put a use. And it's something that will be very useful for a development community. It's something that we can use by staff. And it was really something that we got feedback from staff as well as the stakeholders that it was really needed. So we're introducing that in the draft.
Are you familiar with its use with your prior experience, or is it new to you?
No. I've used it in other municipalities, and it's really effectively the way that most cities function in terms of their zoning. And it's just a really quick reference that you can utilize. In our particular draft, we also include a column for parking standards. So you could look at the chart, you can see where it's permitted, what kind of parking regulations are required, if there are special standards. It's all on one chart, so it allows you to just have that ease to be able to read the document. So you don't have to read the whole thing. And then we have an introduction of conditional use standards. So I know you all are familiar with looking at specific use permit requests, but sometimes there are certain uses that are generally appropriate, but there may be special standards that need to be set aside in terms of the regulating of them. So take, for instance, a daycare. There might be an instance where we would allow for daycare by right in a certain district if they're able to meet specific conditional standards, and those standards would be outlined within the code. So that, again, helps with the development community in terms of their time in going through the process, but then it also makes sure that there's a basic set of guidelines for certain uses. And so that's also something that's not uncommon in zoning ordinances and really effective.
Does simplifying that obviate the need for P&Z to approve? Are they going to be approving less SUVs and more, and your office is going to be approving more?
Well, it's not even in a separate approval. It's literally, it's a land use that is allowed by right.
It's just going to be there.
Already there. But it would have specific use standards that would be associated with it. So say for instance, just as an example, a daycare, if a playground is required and a fence is required and things like that, those things would be checked at the time of building permit to make sure that they comply. If they comply consistently, then it would be approved. So it would be staff approval, I guess, in that way, but it doesn't require any special kind of hearing or anything like that. And then the big discussion point has been, of course, our downtown Duncanville district standards. In our joint meeting, if you recall, we talked a lot about our current code and how we've had hopes with regard to how it might influence redevelopment. That hasn't necessarily occurred in the manner in which we had hoped. So the opportunity to reevaluate it from a redevelopment perspective, the current code is written a little bit on the side of new construction, but a little lacking in terms of the way to approach it from a redevelopment perspective. So looking at that, the possibility of looking at the existing downtown boundary, we've talked about that as well. If it's appropriate to expand the boundary, change the boundary, all of these discussion points will continue with you all, with the joint P&Z and City Council. Nothing's finalized, it's draft, all of it's draft. But I think for our joint meeting in February, one of the big takeaways is that from that should be some policy direction as it relates to some larger items that the P&Z has already discussed, and see, kind of the council's direction as it relates to some of these things, and downtown is certainly one of those.
How voluminous do you see this work being coming up in front of us?
It's not light reading. Certainly, we've tried to make the code more concise and at least more organized with regard to how it's laid out. Just to give you an idea, this particular section I think might have been 50 pages to read, but that included all of these sections, Articles 1, 2, and 3. So it is certainly not a few pages to read. It's involved. I think the bigger thing is going to be your evaluation and your direction on policy. So you all may not necessarily, there's going to be some legalese language in there about repealing clauses and things like that. That's probably not where you'll want to spend the bulk of your time. You're going to want to spend the bulk of your time with regard to do we expand the downtown district boundary? Do we introduce live-work units? Do we allow tiny homes? Those kinds of policy decisions is really the feedback that staff is looking for.
And with that, this is a lot. So this is going to be a lot, as you mentioned, to kind of go through. I mean, I just wrote myself a note. I'm either going to have to have some one-on-one time with you to kind of get more abreast of this, or recommend we do just a special workshop, but this is so important to the city, and we only have one time to get this right, and it's the future of our city.
I was thinking the same thing, because maybe only one of us around the table actually knows anything more about this than what we get presented by staff. To me, the education process before we get together on the 24th of P&Z, it's kind of overwhelming. I'm thinking, can I read through what you're going to be giving us and really understand it well enough to speak intelligently about it before we get together in a public forum?
And I know we're allowing staff to give us information, but it's still up to us to kind of digest that and understand it more. So I respect the staff, and we respect what staff is saying, but I really have to kind of get a chance to understand it and know it myself too.
So, are you saying you've already rewritten the whole code and the whole thing, and I'm trying to understand what it is that we're going to be doing at that joint meeting, and that are we gonna have more community meetings where other people can see what's going on?
Yeah, there are future community
Before
meetings
we-
planned, before it goes for adoption, before it's finalized, the
But
draft
not
is
before the
finalized,
24th.
but not before the 24th.
So what is the 24th, what is that?
That is a joint meeting with the P and Z to discuss the draft so far.
So the drafts, so we gotta get to see that before then? Because you can't do enough in those meetings like that.
Right, so since October, we've been sending you all copies of the draft whenever we send it to P and Z.
We can resend you those drafts
Yeah, do.
to look at, and we can I think we can probably put together some of the more salient points that you need to look at, what sections that are more directed to the policy, and some of the questions that we're gonna ask you from a policy standpoint, that to give you kind of an opportunity to read it, think about those questions, and then be able to come in and discuss that with the P and Z in the workshop.
So I like to see pictures with the policy. So, because, you know, I mean, our policy of the past has got us what we got today, right? So, right? I mean, that's what's got us. But I'd like to see, like, you know, when you have code, it's real easy to see like a picture, like this is what we mean, but this is not what we mean. You know, these two things, so we can see easily in all these, through these words, because you can't, there's no way we can read all that and understand it without, like Mark's saying, a whole lot of time. There's no way. And to see a picture, you know, picture on a site plan or an elevation, whatever you got, you know how you've seen pattern books, say this is good, this is not good. This is what we mean, this is what we don't mean. So you can, you know, so a picture says 1,000 words, right? I mean, so that's the kind of thing that's going to help us be able to see things clearly and see what we want, what kind of policy.
Does this include the new legislation?
It does, so I was
Materials?
just gonna get to that
Oh, okay.
section. Just wanted to highlight some of the things that were discussed, that were reflected in that first section
Okay.
under review. The second section was the development standards and definitions. So in the development standards is really all of the things that kind of, to Councilman Anderson's point, some of the things as far as the look and feel of a community. Not to say that the zoning districts and land use classifications don't, you know, have that impact, but the development standards is really your landscaping, your parking, your screening and buffering, those kind of visual things that really impact the community. And our current codes, again, weren't written to address redevelopment. So we run into a lot of scenarios where people want to expand, or there is an existing property that hasn't maintained its screening wall, and so how do we treat, you know, the screening of that particular property, things of that nature. And so this section addresses landscaping, our off-street parking standards. We know that those are outdated, as I keep saying, but we're introducing things like shared parking. You know, how do we handle shared parking, off-site parking? How do we handle those things? Things that would make it easier from a redevelopment perspective, but then also put some specific criteria in place to be able to administer the code. Introducing lighting standards that we don't currently have in our ordinance. To your point, Mayor, regarding the state legislation on exterior wall coverings, making sure our code is aligned with those parameters. And then our definition section. Currently, we do not have definitions for all of our land uses. So we're introducing a definition for every land use that's in the use chart. So there is a clearer distinction in terms of how that use is classified, and it helps staff administer the code as well. And then as well as having a definition section for just key terms in the code, which is kind of how our current ordinance is crafted.
So going back to the state legislation that was just passed, we're receiving, well, I don't know about whole staff and whether Mr. Augment and y'all are or not, but the information being put out from various sources says don't be so aggressive to implement everything in alignment with that legislation, because there's a strong possibility it's going to be re-examined in the next session, which is, you know, your your way, 2 weeks away. So is that being given consideration with the consultant as you're going through the realignment, or I say rewriting of these particular standards? Because, you know, nobody's putting percentages on it, but there's a strong percentage that says that's going to be repealed, overturned.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to approach it, and Bob, you can maybe weigh in, but I've heard a couple of ways that some cities are actually just leaving the provisions in their code and making them recommendations. That if people want to comply, they can, but if they challenge to fall under the state legislation, they do. And then that way you don't have to amend your code. I've seen it that way, and then there's also just actually changing it and then knowing that you're gonna have to come back and amend that section of the code should the repeal come from the state.
What I've done with my other cities, I've left those provisions in place, just knowing they can't be enforced until another cycle of the legislature to see if it gets addressed.
Right.
I'm assuming it will be changed some, maybe not totally repealed, but it will be changed some. And because there's a lot of unintended consequences, and I'd like another legislative session before we, quote, rewrite everything. But I don't have any other cities that I represent right now that are rewriting their whole code. If we have a code section like Chastity is proposing, it won't be that hard to change it back if we need to.
Okay. Well,
Are we going to propose any more like form-based stuff? Like Camp Wisdom. I know everybody doesn't know what that means, but I mean more like, you know, what you would do with an old shopping center that you're trying to evolve into, you know, a better mix of uses, or, you know, different things on the site. Do we have any like form-based? Otherwise it's just going to be status quo, right? I mean, another cheap store goes in on that old shopping center, you know, but what do we do with that? Like Main Street's the only district that's got an overlay.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Camp Wisdom should have an overlay, I think, in my opinion.
So
why
what?
not a special district? You know, a special district because it's really ripe for redevelopment,
So
reuse of the buildings.
There has not been a specific draft as it relates to that. But what is being proposed is, do we handle our opportunity areas like Camp Wisdom differently? Do we create an overlay specifically for our opportunity areas? Do we create a form-based code for our opportunity areas? Do we put all our all of our opportunity areas in a PD? Those are kind of the options as far as when we're talking about policy direction. Those are the kinds of things that we'll have to discuss.
And will they, and those have flex, you know, because they're not, you can't just do a straight up form-based.
Yeah,
Because they
it'll
gotta
have to be a hybrid
have-
because of the nature of what we have here in the community.
Right.
You would be able to do just a straight form-based code. I wouldn't say that that's off the table in terms of a hybrid type of thing for specific areas. I mean, we certainly would want that to apply citywide, but I think in strategic areas like our opportunity areas, it might be an opportunity to do that. It hasn't been drafted, if that's the question. It hasn't been drafted, but the opportunity areas, the consultant has put those kind of to the side to say, how do we want to handle these areas? Do we want to handle them through any of the options that I just spoke about?
Just out of curiosity, why wouldn't you do that in the whole city? I mean, I'm just curious why.
Well, it comes with its own set of challenges. One being, it does require quite a bit of administrative requirements on staff. And I'm staff of one. And so it does require a lot with regard to that. But then also, I think that there's, because you want those areas to be a little bit different than certain areas, they come with their own set of challenges. And if you think about our opportunity areas, it's almost citywide. I mean, if you think about any major corridor, they pretty much align in our opportunity areas. Along 67, along I-20, along Main Street, along Daniel Dale, along Camp Wisdom. So there really aren't, if you look at the comprehensive plan in our opportunity areas, there really aren't many places that aren't residential. I will say the residential areas are not necessarily in our opportunity areas, so to speak, but certainly they'd be impacted by the non-residential components.
Could you, going back to Ronnie's comment, can you give us not now,
Yes.
but send us something, a primer on form-based, what's it called, form-based?
Form-based code.
Form-based code, so we can get educated, get familiar with that.
It's the short definition is form-based is the way stuff looks. It's like you get the look, you know, like you have something in your mind like a cube look, you know, of something. So the form gives you that look. It gives you that form, that place you place the buildings, where you place the sidewalks, where you place the parking in the back or whatever, you know.
And that creates the overlay.
That creates the, yeah, well, that could be, an
Could
overlay
be
could
in
be
it.
on top of that.
You throw out the Euclidean zoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you don't separate the uses, so you could have different uses because of the look.
I didn't want to
Dictates
belabor it now, it just we get approval on
It's
that.
basically the way your city looks.
Yeah.
It's like, because otherwise you just have a site with a building on it anywhere in certain areas, but in this, in form-based, you put the building where you want it. And you actually say, we want the building here.
That's different like on Hilton Head Island where you can't have a sign that's more than 8 feet tall or something like that.
Well, that's an ordinance, but
That's
that's
a
part,
signing
that's,
ordinance,
yeah,
but
that's
that-
part of,
does that go
that could be part of
it?
form-based, yeah, it could be.
Part of it.
That's a form, that's the structure of the city, so yeah,
Okay.
it could be.
Okay.
Yeah, it's similar, but not
Yeah, less concerned about the use and more concerned with the form.
about the look and the way it functions,
Yeah.
the way they connect.
So that's why it may be a consideration, you know, if that's the direction, to create some kind of overlay that might apply to the opportunity area specifically. So none of that's been drafted, but that is part of the conversation.
Okay, I think that's really important, so that's.
Sure.
one of the-
But off topic to that for just a second. Chancellor, I heard you mention, and you kind of threw it out there with the staff of one in planning and zoning. During this time, is this the time that we later on consider if staff of one is right during this period of time? When we talk about zoning, since it's such an important component of the city, if staff of one is the right thing to do, maybe that's something we need to look at or talk about later. Is there some reinforcement that we do with the area of chastity to help? Because this is such a big element for our city as we redirect our city to the future. So maybe the city manager, you can bring that back to us later. Is that something else we need to consider on the staffing end?
A lot of it will depend on what we end up with in the zoning ordinance and how much administrative time that's going to be.
Well, I'm probably also meaning in establishing that period, not just after it's done, but going through this whole process of what she's doing now.
Well, the hope is that your code functions in a way that is not to say I wouldn't want help, but your hope is that your code functions in a way that it requires less. It's not as time consuming with regard to enforcement, that it's not so time consuming with regard to P&Z and council consideration, that it's pretty clear with regard to how it's applied. So that's the hope. There will be, of course, introduction of more things that can be approved administratively, but I would say that overall that's the goal, is to actually make the code easier to enforce. So just as an aside.
For example, like she was talking about the SUPs, right now there's a lot of things in the zoning ordinance that require an SUP because it wasn't well defined.
Okay.
That's more work for staff, it's more work for P&Z and for you. As we define those things, it's less time for her to have to interpret it, seek legal advice, then run it through the process. So again, what we're trying to do is make it, bring more clarity to the zoning ordinance. That helps everybody.
And then the next section that will actually be, so you all will actually get this later this week as we prepare for the P&Z meeting workshop on the 27th, is the zoning procedures and review bodies. Again, just our current code has who's responsible for what in various places throughout the code. So this is more just streamlining the section that talks about zoning procedures and zoning review bodies, and looking at the zoning map as well to align more with the traditional zoning map. And so our current zoning map is very different from most municipalities. There's usually a standardized aspect to the map, which makes it easy for the development community. Pretty much anywhere you go, you know, yellow's residential, red's commercial. Ours isn't set up that way currently, and so looking to align that more with what's kind of the industry standard as it relates to zoning maps. And then, so that would be part of the discussion with P&Z on the 27th, and in preparation for our meeting with P&Z and council on February the 24th.
You know, I was just, we're up to 110 pages now.
Oh, as far as the, oh, you're talking about per, yeah. Yeah, so it, again, it's not a short read. If you look at our current zoning ordinance, it's lengthy as well. But it is also kind of a disorganized in a sense. So hopefully this is organized in a manner that makes it a little bit easier to navigate. Again, I think the way that approaching the joint meeting on the February 24th is more about, to Kevin's point, highlighting those major things that certainly, not to say that all of it's not important, but highlighting those major points of information. And I do have a note with regard to Councilman Anderson's request with regard to kind of visual representation of what something might look like versus or about kind of what's being drafted.
Just looking at the contents of section 3, I didn't see too many paragraphs we could forget about.
No, section 3 is weighty. Well, quite honestly, section 2 is probably where you'll spend the bulk of your review, because that kind of goes back to, like I said, what you're probably most familiar with as far as like the look and feel of the areas. Section 1, again, the districts and land uses. We try to be mindful of existing condition. You know, we talked during our joint meeting in July about nonconformity and how we handle nonconforming uses. And that's, again, one of those policy decisions that, you know, how aggressive do we go with that? Because right now, it's just as it currently is in our code, that's how it's currently drafted, unless there's policy direction to do something different.
So which one we covered in the joint, section 3 or 2?
Actually, all sections, but I think depending on that conversation, I'd say probably 1 and 2 would probably be the bulk, but the hope would be to be able to get through.
So let me go back to one of my original questions. When you think about the zoning knowledge of the council and the zoning knowledge of the P&Z board, would you say it's pretty equal? Would you say one has more information than the other? Because if not, what happens when we join these two boards together? We got a learning group over here and a knowledge group over here, and we'll delay our meeting a whole lot longer. And so what am I saying? I'm saying is either individual council members, such as myself, have to sit back with city manager and chancellor to come up to speed, or we have a separate workshop for us to kind of at least get us knowledge level before we join these two joint meetings together. Because if not, again, we're going to be asking questions that zoning will already have the answer to, and we're holding them up.
I share the same, that's why I asked the question at the outset. I mean, this is, going through this and looking at what we as a council have to make policy decisions on without being fully educated and understanding the comprehension of what goes on here, I feel inadequate to make those policy decisions without getting a whole lot more education before we get together with P&Z. Now, that's good. Is P&Z greatly more understanding and educated on this than we are?
I would say,
are they kind of in the same boat?
I would say they've had the benefit of our workshops with them on these sections as they're reviewing them, whereas you all are doing it together in one large session. So yes, they have been brought along further because we have had the opportunity to meet with them as a group as we're going through the draft. So you all are going through your council calendar, I guess, with next discussion. So I don't know if Kevin, if you think if they can add a date to the calendar with regard to just this workshop.
I would suggest a couple of options. You're welcome to go to the P&Z meeting and listen to the discussion there and hear what they have to say and what they're talking about.
That's
and
true.
I think that would help you get a
Yeah.
better knowledge of it,
Okay.
of those sections. If you want, if a couple of you want to meet with us to where we could just do 2 or 3, so we don't have to have a posted meeting, and then that way too you're not discussing policy, it's just more of getting up to speed and discussion. So the policy discussion needs to happen with all of you together. But if you're just wanting to get a little bit better understanding, then we could put together something, Cassidy could present, kind of a quick primer on it. But I'd suggest going to the P and Z meeting too. I think that would be good. Yes, sir.
If they do, and
You got
the
it.
majority, it needs to be posted.
Posted as a possible quorum, and y'all can't be discussing it then. But if you're just going there to listen and observe, you can do that.
I will note, Kevin, though, that the next P, they'll be just discussing the next section. They won't be discussing the previous
Right,
section.
right. It'd just be the new sections, right? Yeah.
Mayor and Mark, I would tell you, this isn't as hard as you really think it
Really? Why should I believe you? I mean, I'm looking at this, I'm going like, great,
Yeah,
hey, I don't know.
Kevin,
I'm looking at the future part of it though
Recorded or
now.
streamed?
is. I am too.
Are they recorded or streamed?
No.
It's only
No,
zoning.
no, no.
That'd be
But how do you do that?
I can do that.
I mean, do you want to?
Then they can watch it at home,
I mean, this is the future of our city.
or
Yeah.
record
Yes, it
it.
Going through this and scrubbing this down is the future of our city, and that's why I don't,
And that's why I'm gonna
to
tell
me,
you
it's a whole lot more
What's
difficult
cost for the workshop?
to
Me
hear.
and here have taken P and Z training to begin with. I have at COG. You can sign up to take it. Now then you have to apply it to ours, but
There's some
It's a
basic,
good
basic P&Z planning and zoning knowledge.
The
right?
unintended
At what?
consequences.
At what?
At COG has.
Oh,
tra-
COG.
Yeah, so
I didn't-
COG, we,
yeah.
so, yeah, we make that available when they have that. We do make it available to P&Z and to, and let council know, so.
So I just want to make sure we get best chance of getting the results that we want, not unintended consequences, which is what
Right.
we got now in a lot of cases. The other thing too is how is transportation, or you got, because if you're going to look at form, you have to look at transportation, you know, if you're going to look at on-street parking, or you're going to look at bike lanes, or you're going to look at walking paths, how does that, I mean, is that incorporated?
It's not incorporated in the
You
zoning
can't.
ordinance.
I don't know how you can do zoning without transportation, I don't understand.
Well, I mean,
that.
I think there's certain aspects that you can do, obviously, in terms of controlling the on-site configuration of properties. But there are some challenges that come with that. For instance, in downtown, you know, the way that the current code is written as it relates to parking, and not having parking standards, but there is no public parking being made available on a consistent basis. So there is a little bit of a disconnect with regard to that. So maybe in those instances, you know, form-based may not necessarily be, like I said, more of a hybrid situation than just a true
I think
form-based.
but I think the transportation at least needs to be considered, you know, because if you're going to do more head-in parking like on Main Street or somewhere else, or even Camp Wisdom, if you decided to do something like that, you've got to deal with it. You got to deal with it on the transportation side. And especially when you're putting bike lanes in, you want to put them in, you want to also have the best chance for economic development with those bike lanes. So I mean, you want things to go together. I mean, transportation, I mean, I can give you a lot of bad developments around where they didn't deal with transportation, and then the development didn't work. Big mixed-use developments that are upside down. I mean, we can look at Victory, we can look at other, you know, even in Uptown, where places didn't work right.
I mean, it is outside of the scope of this project, and, you know, to be honest, it's just not part of this scope.
and
Seems
it's
to be
not,
backwards.
stuff can be changed, it always has changed.
Yeah, but
It's fluid.
But it has to be, it's not fluid all the time, but it's,
It is. If something comes up, we have to deal with it.
well,
But the key is, what Chastity just said, it's outside the scope of this particular
It
piece
is.
of work. We can always take it up as a separate piece
Right.
of work. Let's get this one under our belt and then go. for
well, the
something
bad
else.
it's not a separate issue. They get, I mean, in the best places,
But you can
they're done
incorporate it.
together.
It
They're
can be
they're
incorporated.
done, they're done together. They're not done in silos. They're done together. So that's my point, is
Well, we have to accept the fact that at this point, it's not going to, it's outside the scope of this particular piece of work.
But I think to your point, Councilmember Anderson, you're correct. Transportation is definitely impacts it. And we are, as we have those opportunities. Right now, we're doing a study of Main Street with Dallas County, and that is looking at all of Main Street from I-20 down to Center Street. And so we are working on that study with the idea of what is the downtown going to develop to that we want it to look like. So those configurations that we're studying with lanes, how many lanes are needed, do we have slip lanes, do we have head-in parking type of thing. we're looking at all of that right now as we're working through that stuff.
The transportation plan, I mean, the planners of old time that we have the greatest places in the world were done by the transportation planners, plan the development with the transportation. So I'm just saying, for the record, it's not a good way to do it. So you got to do them together, like you're talking about doing there. I mean, I understand that. So, nothing else said. It's my piece.
When is the next P and Z meeting?
Monday, the 27th. It'll be I don't think we have a conflict with this particular, usually we have them in the chamber, in the briefing room, but I believe they'll probably be in the chamber because I think there's another meeting in this space.
So we could, the city attorney did mention that we could possibly, we don't typically broadcast or stream it, but we could do that, I guess, we set that.
I'd have to speak with Tracy.
Yeah, with IT, but if we can do that, where then you could watch it, you know, or see it afterwards on the channel, then you could do that. Is that helpful, unless you want to just kind of, well, we'll post it as a possible form in case the number you don't want to go to. Okay.
So again, you know, all of the rest of the schedule is basically tentative. You know, if there is much more discussion at the joint P&Z and council meeting than workshop than what can be accomplished in that one setting, certainly, you know, there's some flexibility with regard to the schedule. So really, these are tentative dates. I think on your council calendar, we tentatively have another joint P&Z and council workshop on April 27th, and for further discussions on the section 3. Just as an FYI, it does allow for some flexibility into the schedule.
Hey,
So,
going just a second, when you talk about community open house, would that just be something in broad, or will you have seen, here's the area that we're discussing tonight, zone, district, something, where in case someone wants to come because they're talking about the area they're going to live in, versus just talking about the entire city?
well, this is specifically a broader one, similar to the one that we had at the launch of the project. This will be a broader discussion with regard to how the draft is approaching residential, how it's approaching commercial, how we're addressing some of the things that we heard as far as the design standards, the development standards, and things of that nature. Certainly, if there is a need for additional outreach information, those things can happen. That's why this calendar is more, these are the dates that the consultant will be here, I'll put it that way. But there'll certainly be an opportunity for other input or open houses or possibly presentations, you know, as it relates to the community. Specifically, we'll, like, not on here is stakeholders. We'll have another round of stakeholder discussions about, you know, when we had our original stakeholders interviews, we reached out to Main Street stakeholders and development community. So we would reach out to those same people and say, okay, hey, we heard what you said at the beginning of this process. Here we are with this draft. What are your thoughts here? So that's not listed here, but those kinds of opportunities will also be available.
So I just want to say, I know the communication is going to be key component of this, and I know April's good at that for sure. So making sure we just still put community open house, but we put something that would draw the audience in and want to hear.
Sure.
We know everybody won't be there, but the communication is a really big key to making sure they know what the subject matter is.
Yeah. And I think we had a good turnout at the initial one. We got a lot of good feedback with the survey polls and all of that, and visual preference exercises, all of the different boards that we had. We took all of that information and drilled down in terms of formation of the draft.
And I think they need to get enough say-so, stakeholders do, before it gets to the vote and stuff, not like our trash where we voted, we had a stakeholder after we voted. That last meeting, but get it, enough of them before we have the vote, before we have our meetings. So people have time to absorb it and then comment.
Are we bound by, is there anything, that's what I'm looking for, are there any dates imposed upon us? Are these self-imposed dates for getting this completed?
Yeah, self-imposed dates to try to, our goal was to try to complete it in a timely fashion so that we can get it implemented, so we can start to see some change on the ground. But those dates are flexible.
We can't exercise whatever amount of due diligence we feel necessary?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay.
So just a reminder, that is our project website. There's a link directly from from the city's website. All of the presentations are available online. After the joint meeting with the first iteration of the draft, if it's council's direction, we can put the draft. Of course, it's a draft, so we could put the draft itself out there and put that out there as well. But all of the presentations that have been made, the community open house, polling results, all of that survey information is on that project website, which again you can link to it directly from the city's main page. So, and I'm available for any other questions if you have.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just get your rule of it, I'm coming.
Calendar, Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mayor. So in front of you all, you have a draft of the calendar. We have several things that we were hoping to get nailed down with you tonight on your calendar over the next few months. As Chastity mentioned, one of those is wanting to try to have a workshop, joint workshop with P&Z on February 24th at 6 p.m. So if we look at February, looking at the yellow highlighted items, we'll start with that one, the 24th, the joint meeting with P&Z, if that's okay with everyone, since we've been talking about that.
It's good.
Good.
For me.
Yeah.
Any objections? So looking then on February 4th, as one of the things that we wanted to do is to try to, hopefully that y'all will select a search firm for executive search in February. RFPs are due this Friday to the city. What our thought was is to send you all the copies of the RFPs along with a scoring sheet so that you can score them in accordance with the criteria in the RFP. And we were hoping then that you could come back on Tuesday, February 4th, maybe an hour before the council meeting with your score sheets. Our purchasing manager, Sheila, will walk through that with you to see if there's anything that are significantly different scores that y'all may have that you can discuss and come to consensus that hopefully y'all can pick 2 to 3 firms that you may want to interview. And then by the end of February, we'd like to schedule some time for you to interview firms. Probably need about an hour and a half per firm that you want to interview. So it might be 2 nights, it might be 1 night if you want to try to cram it all into 1 night, but not really looking at the Friday, so probably don't want to do a Friday evening, but maybe that Tuesday the 25th and Thursday the 27th, or select one day. But I guess the first question is, are you willing to come in at 5 o'clock on February 4th to go through the scoring and select 2 to 3 firms?
I'm good.
I am.
At 4 o'clock?
5 o'clock, an hour before.
I'm good.
And what is y'all's thoughts on dates towards the end of the month to actually do the interviews? Because we need some time then to contact them and make sure that they're available. So if y'all can give me 2 dates, would probably be preferable.
I'm traveling all that week, so I won't be here anyway.
Last week in February.
Yes.
Tuesday, Thursday works for me.
Tuesday and Thursday works for me, but I'd like, I wish.
Give me those dates again, please.
February 25th and February 27th. If we can keep it to 1 night, we would.
25 and 27, okay.
I'm assuming you prefer that over the Friday, the 28th.
On 28th,
Yes. Friday night meetings are not good.
Yeah.
25 and 27, okay.
Okay, so 25, 27, okay. And then also in February, we're looking at if you want to have a joint meeting with the park board. Again, y'all had said y'all wanted to try to do that every 6 months, so it's kind of about that time, or if you just want to wait till later.
I want to have a meeting with them, but I'm not available that week.
I'm good for that. I'm okay.
Monday, February 10th, I'm sorry, is what we were looking at for a joint meeting with the park board.
I'm good.
Seems like most people aren't. Moving into March, NLC is March 8th through the 11th. Spring break is the 16th through the 20th. So what we were looking at, a couple of things looking at there, is a possible town hall meeting on Thursday, the 26th. Probably the topic being the census. This is right before the census launches. And so I know that Chastity said that the Complete Count Committee would like to do a town hall, and they would also plan more of a community outreach that afternoon, I believe. So there would be some other activities, allowing people to come in as well, but then doing a town hall that evening on the census, if that's okay with
What was daylight saving time? I guess that was first. What's the time change again? What? What was that, so you're saying, so on the 26th, because you'll have longer daytime hours? You said you want to have some event going on before the town hall meeting? Or after?
Chastity, what y'all talking about doing like?
During the afternoon,
During the
just kind of a
afternoon.
day of events to try to gear up interest to ever make sure that they complete the census by Census Day. The Census Day is April 1st, so just trying to promote that. So it'll be a day of activities.
During the week or on the weekend?
During that day, just on the
That same day.
26th. That same day.
What kind of activities are you talking about?
We've been talking with the Census Bureau. They've talked about possibly kind of having food and, bounce houses, and just kind of have some laptops set up where people can actually come and fill out their census online, because it will be the first time they can do it online this year, this time around. So that kind of event. And then, of course, the senior, having the senior center have laptops again at the town hall set up for people to be able to complete the census there. There'll be a census rep to answer questions if people have concerns, those kinds of things.
The TML for elected officials is 4th through 6th of March. And that's in Frisco this year. We haven't seen that announced yet.
Oh, yeah, 4th to 6th.
One of the other things we're looking at in March that y'all had previously discussed, you recall that you had a presentation from Kevin Shepard with Verdunity on Strong Towns concept, and then at your retreat in October, y'all talked about that, about possibly having a larger workshop with staff and more boards like the EDC, the Park Board, the P&Z, and Council. I've talked with Mr. Shepard about his availability and about options for doing a workshop. We could do like a half-a-day workshop, and either during the week or possibly on a Saturday. He is available around that time frame, around the 21st to the 28th, the Saturdays or during the week, if that's something that y'all want to do. And then he was suggesting we could do like 9 to 1, have lunch brought in, or do like a long lunch over lunchtime, or do start early. Evening, I think you might not want to do because most people are tired by the evening, and I think this is probably something where you probably want to be fresh. So, or Saturday. So, wanted to get your all's feedback on that.
I think would be
That's something
worthwhile
I
to
wanna
have
do.
him in for a half a day.
I agree.
I think as we're working through the zoning ordinance update again, this is probably a good time to have some of that discussion.
So
Going back
we
to
have to
26, are we good? Census town hall?
Yeah, I didn't hear him on Jack.
Good.
Rich, you said 4th through the 6th was the
I'm
TML?
good too.
Yes, in Frisco.
Well, I don't really understand what we're doing on the 26th.
Well, it's really not going to be a council-driven town hall. I mean, so it's really, if y'all can't be here, it's not. It's really going to be more for the census committee to conduct that town hall. But I know y'all like to be there, so.
We have to tell what's going on, but.
Yeah, but it's not imperative.
So we're looking at first Kevin Shepherd during, what, the half day during the day? Right. Is that what-
Yes.
Is it on Saturday, the 21st? Is that what you're suggesting, Kevin?
He's available either the
21st
21st or the
28th.
28th. Or we could look at sometime during that week if you wanted to do during the week. I know people work too, so.
Yeah, that's March.
Yes, March.
Let's do the 21st.
Or the 28th, you already have that police banquet
Yeah.
that night.
So you have it on a Saturday so more people can come from 9 to 1, is that
Right,
right?
yeah, something like that.
I think that's a good idea.
What do you say, Mom?
I think 9 to 1 on a Saturday is a good idea, because more people can come that.
You got a preference on 21st or 28th?
Well, we've got the police banquet on the
Yeah,
28th.
I'd rather go on 28th because you already have me.
I'd rather do the 21st, yeah.
Sir, also, I just confirm with Mr. Timothy, on the 28th, Keep Duncanville Beautiful has their household, was it the recycling?
HHW, Household Hazardous Waste.
So, yeah, all day at Duncanville High School, so also interferes with that.
Let's do it on the 21st.
21st. Yeah, I say 21st, let's go.
21st.
Okay.
Did you say 21st?
That's the 28th.
28th.
That's right. Keep Duncanville.
Oh, they're doing it on the 21st.
No,
No, they're doing 28th.
The household thing.
We're looking at Kevin Shepherd for the 21st.
And the 28th, here's the other deal.
Okay, Keep Duncanville, yes, sir.
I just noticed we are after 7 o'clock.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, oof. All right, so we pencil in the 21st sometime during the, like,
I'll get back with him
10
and I'll confirm.
10 to 2 or 3 or something like that?
Yeah, or 9 to 1.
9 to 1, yeah, whatever, okay.
And talk about later, the mayor just talked about TML on the 4th through 6th from Frisco. Are we staying out there? Are we driving back and forth? What are we doing this time?
It's up to you.
Well-
What I've examined it, what I'm gonna be doing is staying up there, but not staying at where it's being held, because it's probably pretty expensive. So I've asked Kristen to find me a cheap hotel. Because from my house up there, we're looking at probably an hour and a half to meet up there at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And then nighttime driving back and going again.
Traffic.
Looking for something inexpensive to stay, like a Hotel 2 or something.
Tell two. All right.
And it's,
But it's your call, Mark.
it's the
you know.
4th through the 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in the Embassy Suites in Frisco. So Kristen is working on that.
That's March.
March. Okay, okay, so obviously, clearly, we are gonna do executive session. How long will executive session take?
They
Came in?
probably 30 minutes.
Yeah.
30 minutes. Then we better push that to the end.
Can we get rid of it?
Push through April, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I just want, I think I know. So we'll just try, if we can get April nailed down also. Speaking of town halls, we looked at a town hall in April on the budget, either Thursday the 2nd or Thursday the 9th. And then we were looking at the 16th for the Board and Commission annual banquet.
Okay.
Dang, I thought we did
April.
April.
We ran out of money.
It seems like, yeah, you get
Just
done
seems like
with
it
one
keeps
and
happening, doesn't it?
start over again.
April 9th. April 9th. Yeah, that was okay. 16. April 16. Yeah.
I'm good with all
Yeah.
those.
Busy, but overworked, yeah.
I'm only good on
Okay.
that.
All right, we can,
That gives us a couple of months of, farther out, but at least that gives us a few months to work on.
You know, we'll put it back on the agenda, let us look through it again. Put the calendar piece. I think we ran through this pretty quickly, we're gonna probably miss something.
okay, 7:05 recess. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Duncanville City Council meeting, January the 21st and 2020. Got to get used to saying that. The time mark is 7:10. Thank you for being patient and being with us. First thing I do want to mention is housekeeping. We are going to have to move the executive session to the end of our City Council meeting because we were unable to cover that during our briefing session. So for those of you, just so you're aware that that's what we will be doing. So first thing that we have on our agenda for tonight is the invocation. Unfortunately, Pastor Gutierrez has the flu, so Council Member Joe Vera Cruz is going to lead us in the invocation. Please rise.
All right, welcome. Before we get started, I just want y'all to know at my church, which is Trinity Church Fair Meadows over on Caven and Cockrell Hill, we had a chance to pray over our city, and I was our representative there. And one thing we proclaimed was that we would be a light in the midst of darkness. So that's the direction I'm headed tonight. So let us pray. Lord, I thank you for the opportunity to serve with like-minded council members, a mayor and city manager, Lord. But most of all, we do proclaim that we will be light in the midst of darkness. So I thank you for the servant's heart of each one of our leaders here. I always pray for our mayor, our city manager, our council, our servant leaders in each position that they're appointed to. Of course, closest to my heart is our first responders, our police and fire, that they are safe while they're on duty and away from their families. But more than anything, Lord, I pray for our team to collaborate, to just reason things out, but more than anything, to just bring it all to you. So we dedicate this meeting to you, Lord. In your mighty name I pray, amen.
Amen. Please join me in pledges to our flags.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one, indivisible. Thank you. Please be seated. I have two items for the mayor's report tonight. The first one is to publicly thank our staff for the consummate job, professional job, for putting together what we needed in terms of presenting to our city at the State of the City presentation that was made this past Thursday night. Under Mr. Hugman's leadership of the staff and everybody that came together to put that together, it was a lot of work. It's been going on since October, November, and to be able to do that in that forum, it's stressful, granted, but it was all a team job, and I thank everybody that contributed to that. Next thing I would like to do, as you may or may not be aware, one of the things that we have is a program called Champion of the City. And tonight we would like to recognize Ms. Sue Pointer as a champion of the city. So Sue, you come up. The Champion of the City is a program that I instituted in becoming mayor to recognize individuals for their contributions to our city. And I became aware, well, actually, Colonel United States Army retired Dave Pointer, and I go back many years. He and I were on faculty together at a university. Dave taught business law for our business program, and told me what to do and what not to do in terms of actually doing things as well. But Dave and I are very close, and through Dave, I got to meet his precious bride, Sue. And I became more and more acquainted with what she contributes to our city by going to some of our events in terms of the Golden Heirs. And are there any, I see some golden, if you're with the Golden Heirs, would you please stand? Thank you. From what I understand, there are 33 members of the Golden Heirs, and they get together once a week to practice singing. And the individual who orchestrates those practices is this young lady right here, Sue Pointer. And the individuals that participate love her and admire her tremendously. And I had an opportunity for the Christmas program to participate in that particular event, and it was a great joy for me. And that's when I really saw the hours and hours of work that Sue puts into those programs, as well as the Golden Heirs themselves for the practices that they do. So, Sue, I'd like to read this to you. Certificate of Excellence. Susan Pointer is hereby named as a Duncanville City Champion in recognition of her service to our seniors community as Director of the Golden Heirs Choir since 2013. Ms. Pointer orchestrates regular concerts at the Senior Center as well as nursing homes in the city. Her work includes selecting the music, directing the choir in rehearsals and concerts, and accompanying the choir on the piano. All her time is given with a true servant's heart, and she is deeply appreciated by all to whom she serves. Thank you, Sue. And to accompany that certificate on your, what do we call it, Dave? I can forget now. The gimme wall. No, it's not. Oh, yeah. The I love me wall at home. Yeah. We have a medallion from the city of Duncanville to present to you. And not to go away empty-handed, we have a goodie bag. You can take, don't open that here, okay? But you can take that home and enjoy that with Dave and folks, even with the Golden Heirs. So if you'd like to say a few words.
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to work with the people. They are wonderful, wonderful individuals, and they come together in awesome fellowship. Then we go out and we get to bless people in nursing homes, and we also perform there at the Senior Center. So I'm not sure who gets blessed more, the people that are performing or the people that are listening to us perform. It's really a win-win situation. So just keep on loving each other. It's a good place to live.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, that concludes Mayor's report. Council members' reports, Mr. Cooks.
Yes, good evening all. I just wanted to remind everyone, coming up this Thursday, January the 23rd, from 6:15 to 7:30, we have our first year lunch, laugh, and learn at Luby's again. This time our topic would be 2020 census, the importance of being counted, and what to expect. And I was pleased to note that we have many RSVPs already. So to make this really important for those that's not aware of the census, Madeline will be there Swartz will be there to talk about the 2020 census. And if you're not familiar with it, this won't be the first time you're here. You'll hear it more often. But we wanted to kind of kick off the Lunch and Learn with sharing that information. And then secondly, I have not set this for this year, and that is Shop Duncanville. Perhaps you are already shopping elsewhere, a retail store outside of Duncanville, and when you look around, that same retail store is here in Duncanville. And I'm going to ask you to not necessarily increase what that you're shopping, but if you're shopping somewhere else, and one of our stores in Duncanville has the exact same store, if you will turn that shopping around and shop Duncanville, we would encourage you to help our city by shopping in our own city. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none, in terms of council members' reports, Mr. Huckman, city manager's report.
I have nothing.
Passing on that, and item number 2 on our agenda, proclamations and presentations. We do not have any. Moving to item number 3 on the city agenda, this is citizens input. And pursuant to section 551.007 of the Texas Government Code, any member of the public has the opportunity to address the city council concerning any matter of public business or posted agenda. However, the act prohibits city council from deliberating any issues not on the public agenda, and such non-agenda issues may be referred to city staff for research and future action. All persons addressing the city council are limited to 2 minutes. And in order to do that, you need to fill out a card ahead of time, and I have one card here. It is from Misty Bain. And if you would please state your name and address for the record, thank you.
Misty Bain, 102 Walnut Street, Duncanville, Texas. While I support the Signature City event, I personally do not support the proposal as it is presented. The only concept that's definite in the proposal is the sanctioning of a barbecue competition with the Kansas City Barbecue Society. There are unknown fees associated with the sanctioning of such a competition, and we will be responsible.
Excuse me, I'm having difficulty.
Sorry.
Yeah, can you restart her timer at 2 minutes? Because I really couldn't, I could barely understand what you were saying.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Can you hear now? Okay.
Oh, better, yes, thank you.
Okay, I was saying that I support the Signature City event, but I do not support it as it is proposed on tonight's agenda. The concept of the proposal has a sanctioning of a barbecue competition with the Kansas City Barbecue Society. There are unknown fees associated with the sanctioning of such a competition, and we will be responsible for all travel, hotel, food, and other expenses for a barbecue competition that doesn't necessarily attract the wide diversity of people that we have in our city. In fact, market research shows that people 18 to 33 years old do not even watch the most popular cooking shows on television, so a barbecue competition will likely be unappealing to a very large and vital target market. KCBS will require that the event be promoted as a KCBS event, and we said that this would just be one element. Partnership with them will pretty much showcase the event as a barbecue festival, which is not something that the majority of the citizens in our city have stated that they want. I believe that we need an entirely new approach with a fresh approach. There's been a lot of ideas presented by people, if y'all looked online, or maybe we could consult with more citizens to get their input on this event. I know that it's not a lot of money to some people, but you know, we have to be real prudent about how we spend our tax dollars. In limiting the location into just a fenced-in area at Armstrong, I feel like we're limiting our ability to market ourselves to businesses and to really show off our city, to show how great things are. A lot of what people are interested in here that live here is that we have such a natural environment and we have such beautiful creeks, and I believe that we need to showcase that as part of our event. What is presented is lacking and needs to be revisited before approval, in my opinion, and I would appreciate y'all reconsidering. Thanks.
Thank you. It is noted that that particular item is up for individual consideration on our agenda tonight. So while we may not directly respond to Ms. Bain at this point, some of those topics will probably come up during our discussion as we go over the agenda item. Going on to item number 4, the consent agenda. The City Secretary, please read the consent agenda items.
Item 4A, consider the minutes for the January 7th City Council special meeting and the January 7th City Council regular meeting. 4B, consider a resolution authorize the annual procurement of senior meal program services with Visiting Nurse Association of Texas and the unit amount bid through the City of Grand Prairie contract number 17124 with an annual estimated expenditure amount of $72,500. 4C, consider a resolution approving the Dallas County Election Systems and Software Express Vote Universal Voting System to be used in all future elections held in the City of Duncanville while contracting with Dallas County Elections. 4D, consider a resolution casting the City Council of the City of Duncanville's vote for the 4th member of the Board of Directors of the Dallas Central Appraisal District.
Thank you. The Chair will entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Councilmember McBurnett. Is there a second by
Second.
Councilmember Cooks? Seeing no discussion, please vote. Thank you. Consent agenda is approved. Moving on to item 5 of our agenda, items for individual consideration. Consider a resolution authorizing the city manager to move forward with the planning and implementation of a signature community event for the fall of 2020. I want to preface our work on this particular aspect of this agenda item. I had some deep thought about what we were doing, and I did inform Mr. Hugman of my concern, and I think the best way to do that is to, I sent him an email, and I think for public record, the best I just read the portion of the email that applies to giving my concern before Mr. Stevenson begins his presentation. So, as I said, this is an email that I sent to our city manager, Mr. Hugman. I've given this subject a great deal of thought. Reference our conversation this week about seeking proposals from other sources for the signature event, and looking back on the criticism received for doing sole source for waste management. While sole source in that case was substantiated, sole source for this action is not in my view. While the individual who briefed council said his fee was $30,000 within the city manager's procurement authority, the city expenditure of $150,000 for the event does make it a council matter, as it should be. Further, whomever we choose as a promoter is someone with whom the city should have a long-term relationship. That said, due diligence would indicate more than one source should be considered. And based on that input, I believe Mr. Hugman and Mr. Stevenson and staff have had some additional discussions. So I believe, if I'm not incorrect with that, Mr. Stevenson, there's going to be some discussion about the approach that we're going to take for this signature event. Okay?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. It's on now? There we go. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Bart Stevenson, Director of Parks and Recreation. This is an opportunity really to summarize the discussions we've had both on the December 3rd as well as the January 7th council briefing sessions regarding a signature community event. In those meetings, we talked about a number of things, but we've kind of bulleted them here on one slide, so we can just stay here on this one slide for our discussion. But one that we all agreed that we wanted to implement a signature community event in 2020. The musical artists that we will select for the two-day event will be diverse. We will not just focus on the blues as the past Lions Club event did. There will be no admission charge. Beer and wine will be available for sale. We'll include a large children's area and ample vendors to entice our families to come participate in the event. There will be a barbecue competition with KCBS, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a few minutes. The budget of the event is about $150,000, of which $100,000 will be dedicated from the Hotel Occupancy Tax Fund, with the balance coming from the general fund balance. And the last bullet, which again we'll talk a little bit more and have some discussion, is to utilize a professional event planning firm to help with the coordination and execution of the event. Since our last discussion on December 7th, I did reach out to my Parks and Recreation professionals in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and have obtained additional firms who do this type of work. And we certainly, at that time, I had planned on certainly contacting those folks and have conversations with them as well, in addition to Mr. Jerry Thompson that came to your last meeting. So certainly we are open to opening up the search for a firm. And we had certainly anticipated doing that even before your last meeting. And so we're prepared to do that. The other option, again, is to take another step back and really do an RFP process, whereby we do a formal process through our purchasing department, really opening it up to anyone who would like to be involved with this particular project and receive those back and then work from there. So there's a couple of different options. Really, what I want to caution you, or what I want to make sure you're fully aware, if we take those routes of stepping back and waiting to and not moving forward with a consultant immediately, that may affect the planning of the event being in 2020. And you may want to make some considerations of perhaps postponing that event to 2021. So.
I have some some comments and some things I'd just like to present to the council for some consideration of their own. I personally would prefer to see an RFP because, as I said in my email to Mr. Hugman, whomever we choose for this, we are creating a long-term relationship. Despite the dollar value of what Mr. Thompson proposed to us of $30,000, which was within the city manager's procurement authority, this association could go on for several years if done well and done properly. So I would see that our exercise of due diligence as a council, I think, would be better served to open it up to an RFP. Understanding, of course, it's going to delay putting on a signature event in September of 2020. Now, here's the wrinkle to that, as you understand. We could still do something in September of 2020 as a city and have some events for our city to invite our community to participate. It could be music, could be food trucks, could be bounce houses, but we wouldn't at this point tag it as our signature event for the city, because as we discussed in council last time, it's our job as council to decide what that theme should be, what we as a council believe our city represents, and how we would tag that as our signature event ad infinitum, going on in perpetuity for how many years, how many decades would that signature item be? So we could still do entertainment this this fall in September, just not have it as the signature event. The signature event we could do sometime in 2021, subsequent to the use of the RFP and having some interviews with some promoters that have experience in this and moving forward with it in that particular respect. So saying that, we can still do stuff for the community.
Sure.
To capsulize it. We can still have some fun for our community. The due diligence necessary, I feel, needs to be put into an RFP, and we delay the actual signature event per se until 2021, until we actually have our hands around it and do it very, very well and do it professionally. So the other things in terms of an interim events in Armstrong Park, other parks around the city for music and so forth, that falls on your shoulders,
yes.
I guess.
And I would add that we do have
that.
monies in our recreation operation funds budget to do concerts in the park and some movies in the park. And those were actually being planned for September before this signature event came to light. So we do have plans to do those types of events,
Okay.
those little one-day, couple-hour events type things.
And one other personal opinion that I'd like to express is that I'm not, this is just me. That's what we're here for. This is open public debate. I'm not hard over on KCBS. Even Mr. Thompson wasn't as a professional. It could be secondary or even tertiary in terms of what place it took in doing the event itself. The real purpose of this is to create a signature event. Barbecue competition would be kind of nice to have. In terms of making it part of it, that would be up to the professional promoter to decide how powerful and how much weight it would actually add to our signature event. So that's just my personal opinion. I just wanted to say that. Now, I think the whole point of this tonight is to make this public discussion for our city, but among ourselves as council, to have everybody kind of give some input in what they think. So, Ms. Jameson.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, so if it goes out. We talked about having a signature event at the city council retreat. And by that we mean like in Grapevine with the Grape Fest, or you've got peach festivals, pecan festivals, you've got an Oktoberfest. Different cities have different things. So I thought about it and I thought, what do we have that's different? In the meantime, also, I ate at Mudhooks and ran into some students who had graduated from college, continued to live here, and are working on their postgraduate degrees, still living in Duncanville. And I asked them, what is it about Duncanville that you like? And they said the creeks and trees, how beautiful it is. That's exactly why I moved here in my 20s from North Dallas, because it's beautiful, it's stunning. And to me, that is what we have. And that's what other people don't know until you come here. And most people, when they come here, are stunned when they see it. And so I thought, so that to me seems like something that we ought to capitalize on. And I thought about not just a park. And I mean, I haven't said it to this council, but over this time I thought about it, and we have this piece of property, the Ladd property, that has a creek through it. And perhaps if we worked on that and got it to a point, we'd have to probably confer with Texas Wildlife and the parks, because they have control over the creeks, and find a way that we could make it so, kind of like San Antonio with the Riverwalk, so that people could come and see the creek. And we have, as you all know, we have creeks all the way through the city. They don't know that. They don't, until you come here and look, you don't know that. And when you think about a signature event, what you're trying to do is play up something that people will come here to see and stay and enjoy the festivities. So I know that some of the things that were written in the piece before, I don't know that a barbecue competition, and certainly with KCBS, that was the Lions Club function. And I don't know that the Lions Club ever asked us to take that over. I think that was just something that they had decided to step back from, and I don't know if they'll want to do it again, but for the city to take it over wasn't necessarily something that we were asked to do. And then there was and we're talking about how many days. I just got back from a conference that was held in Grapevine, and over Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they still have their Christmas lights up. They have a 10-foot Santa Claus, and it's just continuing festivities. And so I don't know that that's exactly what we want to do. I think we need to have more discussion about that, but that we have a longer time period than like a one-day blowout, or maybe Friday, Saturday. That to me probably is too much money for too little time. Maybe it needs to be something that we can do that's a little longer and enjoy the festivities. And I don't know that, I just think that we as a council should have a discussion about this and sit down and talk about it. The fellow that came to talk to us said that barbecue and blues were kind of passé in the event area. And when you're having a competition, but it's just a group of people over here that are having a cook-off, and then in addition you have to pay for this group to come here, I don't know that that fits in with what we're talking about. What we're trying to talk about and what we need to get all the citizens involved with is a festival that people will come here from different areas to see, participate in, enjoy, and come back again next year and the next year. And so we have to be, I think, different. We have to play up the things that are important to us or that make us different. I don't know that people would drive across town to see a park. Everybody has parks that they think are pretty fantastic. Or we have to have something that's us. And so that's why I think that we should get input from other people, citizens. The council needs to talk about it, and whether we want to pay for a group to come here to judge barbecue for a limited group of people. I don't know. I would like to ask, though, we have a Lions Club member up here. Don, do you know, did you ask the city to take that over?
Not specifically.
Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't think so, because I've talked to many Lions Club people, and at first they were upset that we took it over. And so it all of a sudden turns into we ask them to. I don't think so. This was something that we had planned, and I think that we have to work on it more. We were doing our calendar earlier, and I was thinking then that we ought to set aside a time that we talk about this and maybe become more definitive in what it is we want to see, instead of just carte blanche saying, go throw a party for 150 was supposed to be after any revenue we had taken in. So it was 150 expense. Now, the 100,000 of it was hotel motel, but 50,000 of it is general fund, that comes from your taxes, and it's stated also that if there was any more money needed, if we ran into something where we needed some more, that we would go back to general fund. And so I just think it needs to be planned out better, and not just, that's a lot of money for a party, in my opinion. I just would like to see it planned out and have something that's significant that would stay. And we have a party planner sitting back here. So we just need to know more about, and a lifetime resident, what would make people come here and come back, keep coming back? Because we're different. What we have that's different. And so that's what I would encourage you to think of. And I think that we need to think about this more before just doing it. I do want to have something, though. I want to make that clear. Okay.
Is there other input from council members? Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. First and foremost is that the Hotel Motel Tax Fund is there to provide resources for events that meet two tests. One, it puts heads in beds, and the other one that it fits 9 categories, arts, music, etc. If you're not careful in putting this particular event together, what you're going to find is that it's not going to meet the heads and beds requirements, and the unintended consequences of which more will come from the property taxpayers. Yes, it will. I've been doing this for 40 years. More will come from the property taxpayers than from hotel motel, which is paid for by people coming here from out of town to stay here. Now, after this, you go check the record and you'll see that I'm right. Now, second thing is, I ran a little late to coming to the meeting, because what I did was I went back and replayed the videotape from the briefing of last council meeting. I want to read it to you. At 33 minutes into the meeting, the briefing session, the mayor asks, so is there a consensus that we want to do this? Several heads nodded. Councilmember Jameson, we want an event, we certainly have to fine tune it. Mayor, well, that's his job, his being the consultant that came here to talk to us. Councilmember Jameson, right. The mayor, so do we have a consensus that this is the guy we cut a contract to for $150,000? Councilmember Jameson, how much does he charge? The consultant said we have a flat fee. Councilmember Jameson, what is your flat fee? Consultant said, I offered a discount. The flat fee is $33,000 included as part of the $150,000. Councilmember Jameson, Included, is it included in the $150,000 or not? The consultant said yes. Councilmember Cooks, can you give us a 20-year contract? The attorney said, well, we can't discuss the particulars of contracts at this time. Not on the agenda. You have to come back. Here's the problem that I have with that. That gentleman came and he gave us his time and he told us what his fee was. Now, the unintended consequences of that is when we go out for RFP, everybody else that will take a moment or two, like I did, and look at the briefing will know how much this gentleman was offering and undercut him. So my question is this how we do business? Shame, shame. So why don't we do this? Next time, before we start talking about stuff, why don't we take a moment to think about the unintended consequences of what we might say, and at best, just don't say anything. Just say, thank you very much for coming and sharing your ideas. We'll get back to you if we need to. All things being considered, that would have been most fair, I think, to all parties involved. Other than that, I'm good with everything that's been said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. I would like to interject one thing. Two things. As I stated in my email to Mr. Hugman, and you are correct in what you wrote down in terms of a transcript from what I said during that briefing session. I reconsidered. I was overly impulsive, and I was wrong. And that's why I sent the email to Mr. Hugman saying that we need to step back and exercise some due diligence on this. So with my impulsiveness of that night, I'm saying that, you know, I no longer feel that way, and I've expressed that at the outset of this particular discussion. Secondly, the aspect of alleged shame of doing business, I object to that. We can, based on what we are discussing today and taking a better look at this and stepping back, putting together an RFP, I believe, will put in writing, in black and white, a description of exactly what we as a city want from this particular event. As a result, that RFP is going to specifically designate and articulate requirements from a promoter that Mr. Thompson did not have. So there is no purpose in saying that there is some problem with our doing business with an RFP, despite the fact that Mr. Thompson presented us with a discounted fee. My feeling is, and this is strictly my feeling, that when he sees the RFP and sees the specifications and determinations that we as a council come up with after some more deliberation, that his offer of $33,000 most likely will not stand. So I take exception to the allegation that our doing business with an RFP is going to be something that would be a wrong thing to do. In regards to Mr. Thompson, I'm sure that he will be happy to participate in an RFP once we give the full specification and understanding of what we'd like to do. Ms. Jameson.
I think there are a lot of times when people get caught up in the moment and try to make a decision, step back, sleep on it, think about it, and go, whoa, wait a minute. And that's kind of what happened. And I've talked to the city manager about that before, about how we're presented with something, and the other side of that, to what the council member said, when he said, don't say anything. Well, they've also moved forward when you don't say anything, and said, well, you didn't say anything. So the problem we have is that probably in the process that we do need to have a presentation, not be expected to make a decision right at the moment, and talk about it some more and come back. We had one person, And if he's offended that for his visit and coming out here, $33,000 is a lot for one visit. If he thinks he should get it just because he made a visit. A lot of people come and talk to you about, even in your homes, talk to you about different proposals, and you may decide, yes, I want to do that, or no, I don't. And so what we did was we had a discussion. I too, was listening to it. We've talked about it. We want to have a party. It sounded pretty good. And then when you step back and you think about it, you think that's a lot of money and we haven't planned it. And to keep bulldozing forward because you said at the time, oh, that sounds good, that isn't prudent at all. And I know that most of you probably have thought before that you wanted to do something and then thought about it and thought, well, maybe that's not the best way to go about it. So I don't have a problem with it either. And we did not take a vote. There was no vote taken on that night to approve that. It was a discussion only. And one more time, $33,000 for one visit. I'm sure he's been turned down before on visits that he made his proposal at. This wouldn't be the first time. But I think that we should be prudent and it should be thought out and the whole thing looked at, not just because what we had intended, once again, was a signature event, not a party. And it wasn't going to be, oh, let's get the food trucks, let's get the bounce house, then let's think of what we want our signature to be. That's backwards. As my grandmother used to say, that's putting the cart before the horse. It's not prudent. You should think about what your theme is going to be and then plan the party or festival behind it. And it's not name the theme, because I've heard that too. It's not name the theme. It's we decide as a community what other people would like to see here, what would make them come here to look, to see it. And then we plan what we want to do around it. So I don't feel badly because I slept on it, thought about it, and thought we need to back up. And I thought about some of the people in town that probably have some pretty good ideas.
Mr. Anderson.
So if we're going to back up and reevaluate this, I really think that we ought to have a group of people that are interested in these events, and there's some here in the audience tonight, come and collaborate with him and to talk with him and find out what the event's going to look like, what is the brand going to be. I mean, when we started Duncan Switch several years ago, we sat around a conference table and we talked about what we wanted it to be and where it came from, and went back to the old railroad, the railroad stop here. That's what it was about. And that was a collaboration of city council people and, stakeholders and neighborhood activists. And I think that we ought to do that here, and we ought to find out what is special here. And one thing, Duncanville's median age, I think, is 34 years old, which is really young as compared to, I think that we need to reach into the millennials, and we need to reach back and find out it's not just about what we want. And some of these events maybe are worn out, like maybe the barbecues and blues is worn out. I don't know. I don't really go to a lot of these events, but I think that we ought to look at what young people are wanting. I mean, we need to be cultivating the young people to stay in our community, and we ought to find out what they want. What kind of music and what kind of art and what kind of food do they want. Maybe it's much more simple than we think it is. Maybe it's not this complicated. Maybe it's just finding the right music and the right things. But I think we ought to reach into the community, and I think we ought to do it quickly. I don't think we ought to waste time doing it. I think we ought to move forward on this, Mayor. I wish you could appoint a group of people or invite people that want to be involved and have some work sessions very quick, and let's come up with an idea. I think we could come up with some really good ideas with staff and some of the stakeholders that are right here in this audience tonight. We could come up with some good ideas and a brand and what we wanted it to look like.
Okay. Mr. Cooks.
Yeah, a couple of things. Mr. Anderson, thank you for kind of leading the way what I was going to talk about it as well. You just talked about the average age in our city is 34. The average age on our council is about 61. Yeah. Right. Give or take a few years. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. And Mayor, I kind of blew yours up a little higher, but still, regardless, the average age.
I can't remember telling you when year I was born.
I figured it out. So regardless, what I looked at though, when you think about to Councilman Anderson's comment, is we want an event that'll reach overall the whole scope of the whole city. And so what a better way to re-engage a multicultural committee who has a little bit more activity, a little bit more diverse, even in their committee, that could still come up with, to your point of bringing people in. We got a group of people, a multicultural committee. They're not as active right now because there's nothing for them to do per se. But this is a great theme, a great opportunity for that multicultural, along with the park board, to do a joint venture to talk about how they can make this event work. Then the second part of this is, I think the item on consideration, though I know we talked about this at our retreat of being a city that has festivals, the second part of this, 5A, I believe, is saying not for us to approve a vendor, but to approve the event. And so it says, consider a resolution authorizing the city manager to move forward with the planning and implementation of a signature community event for the fall of 2020. And unless I'm incorrect, before you designate a person to take over that, another item on the agenda has to come back to approve who will do that. But if I'm reading the item for consideration, it is to approve a signature event of $150,000 and not a person to do it. So maybe I'm wrong.
It's approving him to do it.
The only aspect of the resolution that would need to be modified in terms of the overall approval of this council is the inclusion of KCBS. I mean, that would need to be stricken from the resolution. We can still move forward with what we want to do in terms of moving forward with this.
But letting the city manager go ahead and line up everything, because we haven't decided.
Exactly. And so, yeah, the point is taken that the resolution does not designate an individual. It designates an action for staff and for the city staff to take. Mr. Hugman, I know you wanted to make a comment.
Thank you. I would like to clarify a couple of things and also to address some of the recent suggestions. So I would like to clarify that when we brought Mr. Thompson in, that was because as a result of our briefing to you in December when we discussed with you the discussion we'd had with the promoter about this idea of a barbecue and blues festival. And he had a lot of misgivings and reservations about it. He gave us a number of suggestions. We had that discussion with you in December. But you had more questions, and we said, well, we can bring him in to answer your questions directly. And that's what we did in January. We did not bring him in as the promoter to do the work. We brought him in as a consultant to answer your questions. It was the council members who then started talking with him about hiring him immediately. We had, as Bart said initially, if you wanted to move forward, we had some others that we would talk to get an idea. But since y'all seem to be wanting to move with him, wanting to move forward with these things, and as he had said at the time too, if you want to do something in September 2020, you need to start now, when it's already tight. And so that was why now we brought this to you. But as the mayor started at the beginning, given that there's a lot of questions and a lot of, this is kind of coming together very fast, and there's a lot of questions about, well, what are we doing? What is the theme? Should we look at others? And so when we discussed it today on staff, we do feel that probably the best thing would be to step back, do an RFP, to bring that back to you as the council so that you can select a promoter that you feel is going to be best to work with. It also gives you more time to get community input on what you want this event to be, and it gives us more time to really plan it. But when you're putting this kind of money into an event and you want it to be a signature community event, I think being prudent and taking more time to plan it out is the better approach. And if you look at saying, okay, let's shoot for spring of 2021, it gives us more time to really think this through, work on it, and come back to where I think you all as a council would be more sure of what you're wanting to accomplish and what you're going to get out of this product. So that's my suggestion, our suggestion as staff.
We have, excuse me, we as a council have an opportunity. We can table this and do what Mr. Hugman said and kind of come to an agreement that probably doing the best thing for our cities to do an RFP, and at the same time have our Mr. Stevenson and staff do some things for our city in the interim that are not quote-unquote signature events. And maybe put our target, instead of September of 2020, put our target for spring of 2021. And in that respect, you know, I'm comfortable with that. And as I said, I apologize for being so impulsive when Mr. Thompson was there. You know, sometimes it is what it is. And I've said I was wrong in being impulsive. And if I guided anybody into thinking that way, I apologize. Didn't mean to. As I said, it's a reconsideration of what this could mean for us, not could, what this event will mean for our city requires some more time to put this together. And I agree that, first of all, you know, I did say I believe an RFP is what is necessary. And we can also have a resolution coming back to us that includes the comments about getting some town hall, getting some input, getting some people to tell us what they would like to see. As I said, because the onus for coming up with the theme for this is on us as a council. It's not up to a consultant to come and say, this is what we think that your signature event should be. This is us. This is we. This is not a consultant. So that mantle of responsibility weighs heavily on me in terms of doing what's right for this to be a grape fest, for this to be an Oktoberfest for Madison, to be whatever it is. We've got the opportunity here to really, really do something different and better for our city. Mr. Harvey.
I'd like to make a motion that this item be tabled.
We have a motion and a second that this item be tabled. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. It is approved that this item be tabled. Mr. Hugman, Mr. Hager, City Attorney, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe in our discussions you have a pretty good understanding of what council would like to do, or not.
Sorry, Steph.
I believe what the council has said, suggested, and is the direction to staff is that we will put together an RFP for a promoter for an event. We will come to you with the draft of that RFP for you to be able to provide to us as much detail as you would like to put into it as to what this event is supposed to look like. And I would ask the council to look at how do you want to get community input on what kind of an event, what would the theme be if you want a theme? What is that going to look like? Now, I think, you know, certainly in discussing with whatever promoter you have, they're going to probably give you some ideas on whether that's a marketable theme or not. You know, the idea of this event is to bring people into the city. So.
Definitely.
Just one real quick comment on behalf of Mr. Thompson. I was a staff member who talked to him the most, I guess. So I did make it very clear to him that he was coming in as an educational component at the December 7th meeting. I don't think he has any misgivings about the fact that he was automatically going to be awarded the job. In fact, that was kind of a surprise to him that was even brought up. So he was there clearly as an educational piece and not there as trying to, the feelings that he was the sole source vendor. So he would be, I think, just fine with an RFP process. And
okay,
would participate with that.
Good. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased. I'm comfortable with what we've done here as a council. Okay. The timestamp is 8:04, and we're going to recess City Council and go. I'm sorry. Oh, Chief. Yep. I'm sorry. Item 6A. Received the Police Department quarterly report.
Lieutenant Hendricks looked so disappointed there for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't want to get all dressed up for nothing. This tie's a little stuffy. I don't want to have to wear it again next time.
Wait a minute.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Chief,
Thank you, Council.
Your lieutenant just said that she got dressed up with a tie in hopes to never wear it again.
I just didn't want to wear it again so soon.
Okay.
So soon. Okay. So again, I'm Lieutenant Hendrick. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Welcome, Lieutenant.
The first 4 slides, we're going to be going over some of our fiscal year 19 work plan items. On the first one, you'll see that the review and implementation of feasible recommendations from the International Association of Chiefs of Police Recruitment, Hiring, and Retention Study. So this is an ongoing work plan item. Some things that we're doing in the department to help further this work plan item is we're implementing a program called Smart Force. You kind of know it on your end as SharePoint. It's the same type of website. It's an information data gathering website. We are using it to communicate. We're using it for communication models, for more efficiency, for pass on, which is what we use as officers to pass on information from shift to shift. So information that they need to know, hiring and retention, and for records, open records tracking, which will be nice because it'll give us more auditing capabilities than just an Excel spreadsheet. The company that we're using has touted our work as a model for what they're going to put up for other agencies, so that they can see what our agency is doing, and they're going pretty statewide all over. So it's kind of exciting to see that what we're doing is going to be the model for what other agencies are going to be doing around the country. The next item is to educate the public regarding police department activities through various media outlets and to include social media. This is also ongoing. Obviously, social media is always an ongoing endeavor. We've used social media to promote not only upcoming hiring exams, but also we're going to have a Q&A pretty soon about being a police officer and working in Duncanville, have officers put that out on Facebook, put videos out about what it is to be an officer and work here in Duncanville. We've also asked the community to help us in identifying suspects, and we've used social media to put out information about when we have arrested suspects for major crimes such as the Capitol murder that we had recently. We've also used social media to remind the community about fraudulent scams and how they are perpetrated. Our next fiscal year plan item is 2.33, which is the migration to the new Zerker Police Records Management System. Now, this has been my baby for about a year and a half. We are actually in the go-live process as we speak. We will go live with this program tomorrow morning, so cross your fingers. It should all go really well. We've all been working really hard on it, and we've been testing it for months and months and months. What it is our all-encompassing system, so it's where officers write reports, it's where it's our arrest module in the jail, it's how officers take calls for service, it's pretty much how we do all of our daily business with records management and everything. This has been not just a Duncanville endeavor, it's been a Tri-City endeavor. It's with Duncanville, Cedar Hill, DeSoto, and SWRCC with our dispatch. So we've all been working really hard, and we're really excited to finally see our end result starting tomorrow.
Quick, is there an integration of NIBRS with this?
Yes, sir. They already support NIBRS reporting, so the only transition is just 1 month of submitting test data to the state to make sure that everything works properly, and then we'll move forward. So that's going to be a really streamlined process. You won't see any hiccups or any disparity in the data.
Okay, thank you.
Our next item is to train and develop current and future leaders. We had 3 officers, Lieutenant McCaleb, Lieutenant Wilcox, and Dwayne Mayo graduated from this latest Leadership Academy. And that ends our work plan items. Moving on, we are going to be having an entrance exam on February 15th. So you can apply to the website that's listed there, anybody who wants to apply, but they need to understand that the application cutoff is 3 p.m. on Friday, February 7th. So it would be the Friday prior to the testing, a week prior. And that's just so that we can acquire the appropriate amount of testing material in time for the test. So if they want to apply, they have to do it prior to, and that's listed very clearly on our website, so you can't miss it. Speaking of hiring, we have hired a lot of people. We have Officer Rogers and Officer Alvidrez. They graduated the Regional Police Academy on October 4th. They're currently in field training, and we anticipate that they will graduate at the beginning of next month. They're both doing very well. We also have 6 recruits currently in the police academy, and we have 1 recruit that was a lateral transfer from the LAPD, and he's studying to challenge the TCOL, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement's licensing exam, which is given in Austin. So we're just waiting for a testing date for the state to provide a date. As soon as they provide a date, he'll go down there and he'll test. Once he tests, if he passes, which presumably he will enter into an abbreviated FTO program, and we anticipate that he will be on the street working autonomously very soon. So with all that, we're happy to announce that we only have 4 vacancies right now. So we're moving forward with our hiring. Training and personnel has been doing a really great job.
A single digit, how long is that? That's the first time, and what did it come down? It was 6 before or double digits before?
We've been in double digits. I'm not certain as to how long it's been that way. Okay. It fluctuates so much that you can't really, it's hard to put a finger on how long it's been, but it is nice to see that we only have 4 vacancies.
Congratulations
Yes.
on all your efforts, Chief, and to you as well.
Yeah, we're really proud of our training and personnel department. They've been working really hard. We also have some other staffing and personnel changes. We hired Ferris Acosta, who is a public service officer, which is our jailers. He was also a graduate of the Duncanville Citizen Police Academy class number 56. So we're happy to see that people going through those classes are then interested in working here. And then we also hired Galen Wilson. He is our new volunteer coordinator. He is really exceptional with multimedia, and he put out a bulletin, and we're really excited to see what he's going to do with our volunteer group and with all of that volunteer work that we have coming through the department. It's really great. So we're excited to have him on board. We have 3 officers attend the Tree of Angels event this year. The Tree of Angels is an event that honors and remembers victims of violent crime. We had Officers Luna and Bird and Sergeant McCarty. So there's some photos of the event here. On October 22nd or 27th, we had our National Drug Take-Back event. We have 2 events every year. This is an event for people to come in and bring in old prescriptions and expired prescriptions, and we were able to bring in 338 pounds this year for this event. We do want you to know that we have the drop box in the lobby. It's always there, so you don't have to wait for an event. You can come in at any time. We just ask you that you don't put liquids in there because they start to smell. And my records ladies don't like that smell wafting in the front window. We had 2 of our volunteers, Greg and Susan Reno, come in and refurbish the plaques at the front of the police station. Susan has experience with refurbishing plaques, and as you can see, she did an excellent job. They look brand new, and we're really happy to have them. Greg was recently voted as the president of the Citizens Police Academy Alumni Association, and we were just so happy to have both of them on board. They're really helpful, and they do a lot around the station for us. Chief Brown and Officer Sisk attended the Texas Citizens Police Academy Alumni Chiefs Roundtable on October 12th. This was in Forest Hills, and it's an annual event run by the volunteers of each of the participating cities. We had National Night Out, which was an excellent event. It was a great success. As you can see in the bottom left, we had a lot of people attend. It was held at the rec center. And on the top right, you can see that our officers are out there promoting the department and trying to get people to apply. Officer Sisk was awarded with the Outstanding Specialist overall by the Texas Chisholm Trail Crime Prevention Association. He was also, as it's not on this slide, but he was also voted as Man of the Year by the Duncanville Chamber of Commerce. So we're happy to have Doug. He is an excellent officer, and he does a lot of great work in the crime prevention department. The next 2 slides are just kind of an overview of awards that were given out here, so you might recall these, if you were here at this session. Officer Arias was awarded with the Life Saving Award. And then Officers Pachaca, Lauer, Seipert, Blackmore, Herring, and Sergeant Tiarino were awarded with the Meritorious Conduct Bar. On August 27th, the police department began its 59th Citizens Police Academy class. 12 citizens were enrolled in the class, and they graduated on November 13th. Part of that fiscal year 19 work plan of promoting citizens and getting the information out through media and social media, Officers Sisk and Detective Berger gave a fraud prevention meeting at the town hall on November 14th. On the next 3 slides, you're going to see some photos of our annual Santa Cop event. It was very successful. We were able to assist 42 families and around 136 children. We were also able to donate toys to local churches, Ronald McDonald House, and Cook Children's Hospital. We especially want to thank, and we really appreciate the support of the local businesses in this event every year. They step up every year, and we get to make it bigger and bigger every year. So we'll go through these, just some photos. On the bottom left, you'll see what we call our wrapping party that we do every year to wrap all the presents. We do it all in one night. And then some pictures of the event on the day of. We were also able to provide a really safe and fun experience for the Christmas parade this year. I attended myself, and it was a really exciting time. It wasn't too cold, so that was nice. So moving on to our department activity for this quarter, we had 8 use of force incidents, and all were found to be lawful and within departmental policy. We had 2 vehicle pursuits that were initiated by patrol officers, and a review determined that the pursuits were within departmental policy. We had 2 internal complaints for policy violations. 1 complaint is still under investigation, and the second was sustained and resulted in a 5-day suspension. On our community meetings and partnerships, October, we had 9 meetings with 2,623 partnerships, including the National Night Out, Boo Bash, and the Chiefs Roundtable. In November 2019, we had 8 meetings with 290 partnerships, and in December, we had 8 meetings with over 279 partnerships, which included the Santa Cop event. This is just a list of the NIBRS Group A offenses for your review. There's a lot of them, so I don't expect you to read through them. We're moving on to the NIBRS Group A offenses for this quarter. If you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, we had 551 offenses that were reported or occurred, 7 of which were found to be unfounded. So we had an actual offense total for the quarter of 544, and 190 of those offenses were cleared by arrest. On the next 3 slides, you'll see comparative data for October, November, and December for the districts. The offenses that you'll see listed are similar to what you're used to seeing on summary reporting. So we'll just click through these. This is November.
Chief, thank you for adding that slide, by the way. Appreciate it.
And then December. Do we have any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Jameson.
I was just going to ask you about the burglary and crime.
Mike.
Oh, the car theft and simple assault, it looked like were the ones that were the highest.
On the NIBRS slide, the big slide?
I hear a lot about the car theft.
Unfortunately, this time of year in that quarter, you have the Christmas shopping period, and that's generally when you'll see a very large spike in car thefts. If you notice on the maps, you'll see that most of those thefts are they're going to be along the main corridors of town where the shopping districts are. So it tends to be a higher number of vehicle or burglaries from vehicles at this time of year just due to the Christmas shopping, people leaving bags in the cars because they're going to another store and they come out and they've been broken into.
And what is the simple assault?
On this, a simple assault is going to be assault, in layman's terms, by hands. So it's going to be an assault where
Like a
there was
fight.
physical contact. I think in this group is where you see most of your family violence offenses.
Oh.
So simple assaults, although it doesn't say family violence because it includes both family violence and non, but that's where most of your family violence offenses are going to fall in the list. So that's why you see a larger portion, because we have a lot of residential areas, so you just have a higher number of those types of assaults.
So there's not really anything we can do to address it?
Other than family violence prevention, education, no, there's not a lot we can do about those simple assaults. We don't have very many where they're not familial. They're mostly familial. We're not just having bar brawls.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Lieutenant Hendrick. Okay, at this time, the timestamp is 8:21, and we will recess City Council into executive session.
Regarding deliberations regarding real property, basically between, located north of Wheatland, east of Cedar Ridge, and west of Cockrell Hill.
Okay, City Secretary is back. We are reconvening City Council at 9:06, and we are adjourning City Council at 9:07. Thank you very much.
For the record, Mayor, no action is needed or necessary, correct?
For the record, no action is needed or necessary as a result of executive session. Thank you.